Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Photo Snap Shot by Joanna Campbell Slan, narrated by Amy Mcfadden. 1. "Anya is all right now," said Cammie Carter, my daughter's advisor. "But you need to come pick her up, please, immediately." 3 phrases guaranteed to panic any mother. 1. The babysitter called and there's a problem. 2. There's something on the back of your skirt. 3. Your child is all right now. If Anya was all right now, what on earth had happened earlier? "Whoa, what's up? Mrs. Carter, is she okay?" I waved my keys at my boss, Dodie Goldfodder, who owns Time in a Bottle, St. Louis's premier scrapbook store. "Yes," Mrs. Carter hesitated. "Anya's okay, but she found a body." My world came to a skidding halt. I froze in the middle of the store and yelled, "She found a what?" "A body, a corpse. Someone died, was killed, in the balcony of the Delacroix Theater here at school. Could you come get her?" I smacked my cell phone closed and ran, sprinted, really, through our stockroom, doing high hurdle jumps over boxes of scrapbook supplies. My coworker Bama followed me with her eyes. I heard Dodie calling behind me, "Do you need me to drive?" Bama yelled, "Kiki, you okay?" Gracie, my Harlequin Great Dane, jumped to her feet and yodeled as I ran past. But I didn't pause for a second. My daughter needed me. 12-year-old girls should not be stumbling over dead bodies. 2. "Okay," I said to myself. "Calm down. Anya is fine now," I repeated under my breath. I flipped on the radio to hear the dulcet tones of the local NPR broadcaster announcing the next program. If they weren't breaking in with a news bulletin, it couldn't be a crisis. Or could it? I had this sneaking suspicion something was rotten at CALA, Charles and Ann Lindbergh Academy, the fancy-schmancy private school my mother-in-law, Sheila, shells out big bucks for my daughter to attend. CALA is the educational stomping ground of the very rich here in St. Louis. I bet there was no news about a death at the school because the powers that be had decided to keep this quiet. You can do that when you occupy the top rung of the food chain. Taking a corner with my ancient red BMW, I thanked the good Lord for its superior handling ability. The car was too old to have Blue Book value, which was exactly why I'd hung on to it after my husband met his untimely demise and I'd been plunged into poverty. I did a couple more 2-wheel screeching turns, ran a couple of orange lights. That's when yellow turns red on you. Slipped between 2 parked police cars and slid into a parking spot near the portico that marked the upper school office of the school. I stepped on the school seal. I was supposed to bend down and kiss it. If anyone in administration caught me, they'd be running a foot race. My keds gripped the marble of the hollowed halls as I barreled past the dean's office. A tight knot of crime scene investigators carried cameras and miniature yellow cones with numbers on them. And, yeah, I heard them yell at me to stop, but what did I care? I needed to find my daughter. So I ran through the propped-open double doors of the balcony and didn't give one moment's thought to the crowd on my heels. Nor did I stop when I saw the yellow crime tape. Instead, I did a hurdler's jump right over the top of that plastic barrier. Out of the corner of my eyes, I noticed the expression on the nearest cop's face. He was impressed. As well he should be. I'd cleared the tape in one and not broken stride. I'm not naturally athletic, but I do have good balance, and because I was concerned about my child, I was supercharged. So I came down on the other side of the barrier and didn't miss a step. I took 2 long strides into the balcony and nearly stumbled over the medical examiner and an assistant. I recognized the ME from pictures in the paper. They were carefully flipping a corpse onto its back. The expression on Sissy Gilchrist's face was one of pure surprise. I probably looked pretty shocked myself. The difference was I'd get over it, and Sissy wouldn't, seeing as how she was dead. "Who are you?" The Emmy glared at me. "This is a crime scene. Get her out of here." She gestured angrily to a cop, who now had me by the forearm. His grip hurt. "My daughter," I sputtered. "My child found her." And I pointed to the dead woman on the white sheet. "The school called. I'm Kiki Lowenstein, Anya's mother." The cop pulled me away. "Your daughter's fine. We have her in an office." But before I turned away, I got a good look at Sissy, or her remains. The back of her head was a pulpy, bloody mess. Atop her long blonde hair sat a crown of carmine. Moving her body had created an uneven streak of red, which bore a strong resemblance to Picasso paint strokes. The cop led me toward the hallway. "Ma'am, you need to come with me." "Right," I murmured. A wave of dizziness swept over me. The smells hit me suddenly, and I felt a little sick. Then came a thought. "Someone killed my husband last year, and he's still on the loose. Are you sure my daughter's okay?" "She's fine," a familiar voice answered. I stepped away from the cop who was towing me along and stared up into the eyes of Detective Chad Detweiler. He sighed and rubbed his chin. His Heineken bottle green eyes with their gold flecks regarded me sadly. "I got here immediately after they called. I've been talking with her. She's shook up, but she's okay." I nodded. Detweiler and I stood there, motionless, silent. Industry continued around us, with investigators marking spots, taking photos, making notes. We were 2 rocks in a creek, dividing the flowing water. I hadn't seen him in months. In fact, I'd purposely avoided him. I'd dodged his phone calls and torn up his letters. I'd fallen in love with him after he investigated my husband's murder. He'd been a frequent visitor to my home, a friend to Anya, and very nearly something more to me. But when I discovered he was married, that was it. The end, c'est fini, cut. But here's the truth. I was glad, really glad, that he'd come to my daughter's rescue. There was no one else on earth who could have handled this situation better than he. Of that, I was sure. Now I was certain Anya was safe, at least temporarily. But I'd be darned if I'd let him know I was happy to see him. "Where's Anya?" My voice sounded brusque. "Right." His sharp inhale punctuated the word. "She's in the middle school nurse's office." "What happened?" I asked as I walked along beside him. Giving him the cold shoulder seemed pretty pointless. My daughter's welfare was at stake. 3 girls, Anya, Matilda Earhart, and Jasmine Camerzell, were in the hall on their way to class, coming back from a session in the library. They are working on a project together. They heard a scream. They ran to the balcony area and found the nurse, Thelma Selzner, bent over the deceased. "Sissy Gilchrist." "You know her?" I gave a so-so wiggle-waggle of my hand. My fingers shook a little. The girls immediately went for help. Why was Nurse Selzner in the balcony? Did she hear or see something? As I spoke, my stomach flipped over. I had a delayed response to seeing a body. Excuse me," I said, and did a fast trot down the hall and around the corner to a ladies' room, all the while praying I'd make it in time, which I did. When I returned, Detweiler acted like nothing happened. He handed me a Diet Coke. "They were out of Diet Dr. Pepper." He'd remembered my favorite drink. "Mrs. Selzner heard voices in the hall. She's the upper school nurse. Her office is kitty corner from the balcony. She wondered what was up and decided to check things out." Detweiler sighed. He wiped his face with a calloused hand. A crease was forming between his eyes. It would be one of many. When she screamed, the girls were in the hallway right outside. That was all the police had. No one had seen Sissy go into the balcony. It was supposed to stay locked unless there was a program. No one had seen anyone leave the balcony. There were no bloody footprints to follow, and none on the carpet. The crime scene folks were busy charting, gridding, photographing, and examining the area, but unlike forensic teams on television, the fruits of their work would take weeks, even months. No one suspicious had been reported by the teachers, or the janitorial staff, or the administration. The murderer had somehow blended into our tight St. John's Knits community. What would happen next? How would the school respond? What would Calla do? There'd been school-wide notifications before, including an outbreak of staph infections, a vandalism problem, the death of a beloved teacher in a car accident, and a student suicide attempt. Calla handled any and all emergencies in a distinctly aloof manner, with a plan that effectively precluded any questions and human interaction. They left messages on answering machines. A robotic phone calling system did all the dirty work, and in each situation, the boilerplate directive never varied. We request that you allow us to handle this quietly within the school community, and we ask that gossip be kept to a minimum. I had no doubt Calla would handle Sissy's death as it had handled every other problem. It would close ranks. How did she die? He shrugged. Too early to tell, and that's police business. Detweiler, I said, as I reached past him for the handle of the middle school nurse's office. You are so full of it. She'd been hit on the back of the head, I could tell. And as for this being none of my business, when my daughter is involved, it becomes my business. Now get the heck out of my way. Okay, it was good that he'd been here for Anya, but it was bad for me that he'd shown up. He'd lied to me before, by omission. I wasn't about to let down my guard and believe him now, not when it had taken me all summer to put him out of my mind. Right. Who was I fooling? 3. Anya perched on the edge of a chair, her two friends huddled miserably on a cot. All three bore that coltish, gawky, preteen air of supreme boredom, coupled with incredible vulnerability. But the minute my daughter saw me, the walls came down. She flew off her seat and grabbed me. Mom! She'd been crying. I hugged her hard. You okay? The middle school nurse stuck her head out of the adjoining office to offer a sad tisk-tisk. Anya nodded. I'm fine. I turned to the other girls. Are you both all right? Jasmine? Maddie? The middle school nurse said, We have a counselor available. I've encouraged the girls to talk to her. All three girls studied their feet. I knew their opinion of the school counselor. She was probably the least liked adult at Calla. Whoever had hired her was either blind, deaf and dumb, or seriously stupid. But what did I know? I had attended a public school, in Indiana no less, which qualified me as a real-life Hoosier, a term folks from Missouri used as a pejorative. What a crock! That was a case of the pot calling the kettle black and dull if I ever heard one. As my mother-in-law would happily explain at length, I was not qualified to judge what was appropriate for this high standard of living. Good old Sheila never missed an opportunity to remind me of my humble origins. She and I were getting along pretty well lately, but that was only because she wanted what was best for Anya. Me, Sheila could take or leave. Mainly leave. I offered to take the other girls home, but Jasmine's mother was on the way, and Maddie's mom, Maggie, was a teacher there at the school, and a friend of mine. So Maddie was on her way to the kindergarten classroom where Maggie was substituting. Maggie couldn't be relieved of her charges, so her daughter would hang out there until the end of the day. I couldn't wait to talk to Maggie. She'd have the inside scoop on the situation. I hadn't realized Detweiler was standing behind me, blocking our egress. I turned and nearly walked into his chest, getting a good whiff of him. As usual, he smelled slightly soapy and spicy. "I'll need to talk with Anya again." This rankled. I'd banned him from our house. Dodie asked him not to hang around her business, time in a bottle. Now it seemed that he had a good reason to re-insinuate himself into our lives. I must have given him a look that said, "I'm not happy about this." "Let's talk while I walk you to your car," he suggested quietly. "Anya, you doing okay?" He put a hand on her shoulder, and she leaned into him, slipping her arm around his waist, which totally undid me. I used the back of my sleeve to wipe my eyes. My poor kid. First her father gets killed by a wacko, and now this. Worse yet, the man she most trusted was the guy we'd been working hard to avoid. Detweiler waited until we were clear of the nurse's office. "This is going to be complicated, and—" He shot quick glances over his shoulder. "And there's already a lot of pressure, this being Ledoux and all. And there's the school and its rep." Founded in the mid-1800s, Charles and Anne Lindbergh Academy was the second oldest non-sectarian prep school in the St. Louis area. Because of its social connections, the school arguably offers the most desirable education in the area. In fact, CALA was known all over the world for the quality of its graduates. World beaters was a term you often heard used. Captains of industry and leaders of society were also frequently bandied about. As one mom proudly explained, "You go to CALA, you'll never be without a job. You are part of a family." A large, very wealthy family with oodles of connections. Detweiler had reason to be worried. With connections came lawyers. With lawyers came, well, big problems, especially for law enforcement officers. I considered his situation. I wouldn't want to be in his penny loafers. Solving a murder would be hard enough without having all of old St. Louis breathing down your neck, watching your every move. And he was right. My daughter was involved, even though tangentially. Well, tough. He still wasn't invited back into my life. No way, nada. He deserved my cold shoulder. He'd been unfair to me. He'd let me fall in love with him. He'd even kissed me, and not told me he was married. And how about Anya, huh? She'd fallen for him too. She adored him. So had our dog, Gracie. For months after my husband was killed, Detweiler had been respectful to Anya despite her preteen mood shifts, found time to go on nature walks with all of us, patiently taught my daughter to throw like a boy, and thought our sloppy Harlequin Great Dane was just terrific. He was also a competent cook who cleaned up after himself in our kitchen. By contrast, my dead husband had invited his girlfriend along on father-daughter outings and told our child to keep that little detail a secret. Gee, of course George looked bad by comparison. But then there was that wife thing. I sighed. No way around it. Detweiler was off limits. The three of us stepped outside, squinting against the bright sunlight. The detective opened the Beamer's passenger side door and guided Anya inside. "Try not to think about this, okay? I know it's hard. You saw something no kid should ever have to see. If you need me, you still have me on speed dial, right, Anya Banana?" At the sound of her nickname, a nickname I was no longer allowed to use since my child explained she had grown up, my daughter gave him a weak grin. "Yeah." Detweiler slammed her door. "I don't want you hanging around." I decided to set the ground rules right now. He had the good grace to turn away, his face reddening with embarrassment. But he didn't move away from the BMW. Suddenly he turned back toward me, grabbed my arm, and stepped in close. He bent over to hiss, "Kiki, you don't understand. I think she and her friends saw the killer." 4. I raced into Time in a Bottle, leaving Anya out front in my car. After I grabbed Gracie and asked Bama to take my shift, I drove home, trying to ignore my tremors. I didn't want to trust Detweiler, but I knew that if he was concerned, there was good reason. Whatever qualms I had about his extramarital flirtation with me, I had no questions about his ability as a cop. He was dedicated, honest, and good at his job. I needed more information. I had to talk to someone who could tell me what the school's unofficial take was on Sissy Gilchrist's murder. "Give it up, Maggie. What's the scoop? Is Maddie all right?" After I settled Anya in front of the TV, I called my friend, catching her at Calla, hearing the chatter of busy kindergartners in the background while I let Gracie outside to piddle. Maggie evaded my question. "Mother? I'll see you at the regular time and place, Mother," she said with special emphasis on the mother. "Is Maddie okay? I saw her in the nurse's office." "Yes, Mother," my friend said. "We're all fine, but I'm still here at work and very busy, so we'll see you later." I figured someone was listening in and took the hint. "Okay." I knew she meant we'd meet for a bike ride out in the valley, that low-lying space south of the Missouri River, not far from where our kids had golf practice. I understood she couldn't talk, but I felt sorely in need of comfort. I needed to know how safe my daughter was. According to Detweiler, not very. But he had an ulterior motive. Scaring me by saying my daughter saw a killer might just be his sneaky way of being a part of our lives again. Something I would not and could not allow. Anya would be okay to go to practice. The fresh air and exercise couldn't hurt. Maggie would have told me if Maddie wasn't going to golf. That meant she thought the girls were safe. Maggie could provide me with the most reliable inside information on how the school was coping with the murder, and therefore whether it would be okay for our girls to return to Calla on Monday. Anya stretched out on the sofa in our small living room, clicking the remote and moving from one sad parody of American culture to another. Nothing like an hour or two of mindless blather to help you zone out. I tried to contact my mother-in-law, Sheila Lowenstein, because I knew she'd be concerned about Anya. Sheila was dating Robbie Holmes, the chief of police for the city of Ladue, so she'd probably heard about the murder at Calla already. She didn't answer, so I left a message explaining that Anya was okay and promising to phone later. Except my cell phone beeped twice and signaled my battery was dead. Since moving to our new home, I'd chosen to forego a landline. Both Anya and I had cell phones, and we could piggyback on the Wi-Fi signal from our neighbor, who was a famous author. I actually owned one of his books and had it by my bedside, but hadn't begun reading it. I figured Sheila would be irked when she discovered we were incommunicado. She liked keeping me on a short leash, especially after she forked over a significant portion of the deposit for our new quarters. It was a trade-off I'd been willing to make, but some days I resented her interference. I wasn't totally convinced that she knew everything. She was certain she did. That was the rub. At 4, I hustled a distracted Anya out the door. Maggie was at Calla until the end of the year, while the regular kindergarten teacher was out on maternity leave. With 2 kids of her own, Matilda, Maddie, and Matthew, Maggie had her hands full without substitute teaching. But Maggie's one of those incredibly organized women who is so competent she makes you want to puke. And nice? Shoot. Maggie wrote the book on being sweet. As my Nana would have put it, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Maggie never riles anybody. She has no enemies. Zip. None. Consequently, her presence is always in demand. This serves in vast contrast to moi. I've heard that some folks actually shudder when they see me coming. I have this habit of stepping in it. I don't mean to honk folks off, but I inevitably do. In years past, Maggie has substituted off and on as Calla has needed her. It's a tribute to her broad intellect that she can handle almost any subject at almost any grade level. In truth, the school probably values her for her steady disposition and her willingness to come in at the last minute, as much as for her teaching abilities. We pulled into the parking lot of the golf practice range, and I sat there. I wasn't totally sure if I should let Anya play. Coach Bosch must have been on the lookout for us. He strolled over to the car. I got out, leaving my daughter inside, and we adults stepped to one side to speak quietly.
I was in the military, and I'm licensed to carry a firearm. Plus, the school popped for a security guard to attend our team meetings, and the course marshals have been alerted to what happened with Ms. Gilchrist. Your child's safe with me, Mrs. Lowenstein,
he said. The steely temperament reflected in his eyes told me he was being sincere. Coach Bosch was the school's former football coach, and, although a poor match for a team of hormonal and overly sensitive girl golfers, he was a legend to the school's alums. The word was he didn't want to be put out to pasture, or an unused football field, after his years of service, and the alums loved playing golf with him and rehashing the ghosts of football games past. So a deal had been struck to keep him on as girls' coach. With this compromise, he had access to all the best courses in town, and, in return, could jolly up the alums to keep donations rolling in. I thanked the man, but I didn't quite relax until Maggie pulled up and unloaded Maddie. Once our golfers were in the swing of things, so to speak, she and I strapped on our helmets and straddled our Trek 1500s. Hers was a 50-centimeter regular, mine was a 51-centimeter WSD, or Women's Specific Design. I love my bike. With silver spokes and narrow wheels under me, I feel like I can fly. Last spring, Anya and Sheila had decided I needed more exercise. My weight is a constant concern for Sheila. Working together, they bought me this Trek for my birthday. It was one of the best gifts I'd ever gotten. Maggie adjusted her helmet's tightness and pulled on a pair of biking gloves. I couldn't talk earlier. 2 policemen and the headmaster, Elliot McMahon, were standing right beside me when you called. I was expected to help keep the students calm. How's Anya? She's upset. How's Maddie? The same. My daughter trudged out of the car toward the golf course with her shoulders sagging. Maddie also seemed discouraged. The two walked slowly toward their chattering teammates. Fortunately, Coach Bosch hustled them along with a brusque wave of his hand. Our daughters teed off right away. I figured the fresh air would do Anya good. You must have thought Maddie could use a distraction, too. Maggie nodded. Yes, best to get their minds off this. But I'm worried. You should be. It was awful. Mrs. Selzner found the body. She immediately went into hysterics. Gives me a lot of confidence in her ability as school nurse to function in a crisis, I muttered. The noise of Highway 40 caught the words and ran over them like they were a cluster of cigarette butts tossed from a car. Be fair. There's a world of difference between chicken pox and corpses. Poor woman. I feel sorry for her. Who wouldn't have been upset about stumbling over a dead body in the balcony? Such a ritzy place, too. This was one of the perks of having a child at Calla. Your darling offspring took drama class in a theater that would have put Broadway to shame. Back when I was a kid, we rigged bed sheets on clotheslines tied to bamboo poles and sat on hard bleacher seats to watch the school plays in the gymnasium. But then I grew up poor as dirt. Which begs the question, why would dirt need money anyway? It's odd that anyone could get in. Policy dictates that the door to the balcony is supposed to stay locked during school hours unless a member of staff is present. Maggie Earhart emphasized policy as though it were a person's name. She was a great one for following rules. Mrs. Selzner saw it ajar, and she decided to investigate. Bromo was the first person on the scene? Maggie nodded. Bromo was our nickname for Mrs. Selzner, A battle axe famed for treating every tummy ailment?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?